part 3 of the uncomfortable truths of self-defense with Rory Miller. Now, listen, before we get into part 3 of this interview, I just want to remind everybody, surviveviolence.com. That's where you go. You give us your email address. We give you a free masterclass, and you also make sure that you stay updated on all the latest information that we have as far as live training, products, any of the subject matter experts that you hear on this channel. If they're doing anything, that is the quickest way to stay in touch with us and make sure that you get all the up-to-date information. And then also, please subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, share any of the videos that you found useful here. So now we're going to get back into this interview with Rory Miller. Now, Rory Miller is, as one of our very accomplished in this field, longtime corrections officer, CERT team leader, defensive tactics expert, but really just an innovative thinker when it comes to your ideas on self-protection. A lot of what he covers is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, because the truths are uncomfortable. But just like his quote that you see, if you deny reality, you cannot control reality. And so with that in mind, let's get into the third part of this interview. Now, the third part of this interview is really interesting. We cover things like giving the client permission. Why is that important? A lot of the things that we discuss in here are giving you the ability to actually act when you need to. So rather than focusing merely on the physical, Rory has extensive experience on, how people actually mentally get around this and give themselves permission to use the information. And then we go on and we talk about a lot of other subjects that I think you're going to find very, very interesting. So without further ado, here is part 3. The skill sets of destruction are really I think, in fact, the hardest thing about that is getting people over the fact that they can already do it. That they can, we inherently know how to, injure another human being, because why? We know our bodies. We know the vulnerabilities of our own bodies. Yeah. And when you're coming in there, the challenge is giving them a context where that would ever be useful to them, where they could ever give themselves the permission to do that.
Permission is exactly what I call it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was actually I think it's probably one of the, you did it in the context I read it in, you did it. This is more of an issue that you had with female students, but I think it applies across the board. Can you go into that whole concept? I think that's one of the most powerful things in the book.
We used to do a drill all the time. We called it the reception line drill. And the setup for the drill, it's a scenario-based drill. So, Tim, you've just been elected governor. This is the ball after the inauguration, where you're supposed to say hi to all your donors. There's going to be a big reception line. You got to shake hands, hug, thank people for getting you elected. Unfortunately, your intelligence unit says that someone in this party is going to try to kill you tonight. So you had to go through a reception line while being friendly and alert and not look all weird and stilted and paranoid.
Right.
So it was good practice for that. It just inside, I've only had one person that handled it perfectly. So he goes, okay, this is mine, this reception. Yeah, he goes, all right, everybody, just so you know, I've got a cold. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going to be shaking any hands. Or he handled it beautifully, handled it from outside. But when we did this drill, afterwards, I say, that was some great martial arts. That was some shitty self-defense. None of you did what this guy did and just said no. When you saw the weapon, none of you left. None of you yelled he had a knife. This is a freaking martial arts school. There are weapons all over the wall. Why didn't you run? And it took me a long time to realize that they weren't doing it because they didn't see the options. They were subconsciously trying to make me as their instructor happy, and they saw me as a martial arts instructor rather than a survival instructor. So I realized that they needed explicit permission to cheat. They need explicit permission to change rules. They need explicit permission to, and this is not just within me in the training context. Most people have trouble simply being rude. And if you can't be rude to a stranger, what are the odds you can hit one? Which is the bigger taboo? And self-defense is pretty much breaking laws. Self-defense is an affirmative defense. If you hurt someone while defending yourself, You aren't saying you didn't hurt him. You're saying I did hurt him and it was justified.
It was justified. Yeah.
I committed assault, but it was justified. I committed manslaughter, but it was justified. It's one of those, and getting in the and lowest level, I told him, fuck off. He can't have my phone number. Is also, if you can't say that, what are the odds that you can hit him when it's time? So we start with permission to be rude. But it's breaking these. Humans are so incredibly powerful that people are afraid of them as babies. And so even as babies, you start brainwashing them to think that they aren't powerful, that they are weak, that they aren't supposed to do this, and they get in trouble if they do that. And almost everything they get in trouble for, biting their little brother, little sister, or pushing them or hitting them is exactly what you want to do if a stranger tries to grab them.
Right.
But we don't talk about that. We just talk about don't do it. And so people grow up with all these mental leashes. And I'm going to go one more side rant on this. So we have to explicitly give them permission. It's okay. The bad guy makes these choices. He puts you in this position. He chose this. I like the world with you in it better than I like the world with bad people in it. Yes, anytime this goes on, there's a chance you're going to make an orphan or you're going to make a widow. But you know what? If you don't, it might be your widow. It might be your orphans. And that's a worse decision. So you make the goddamn decision. And you are worth fighting for. You're worth living for. Because I want to back up on this. Somewhere in the last, 15, 20 years, passivity has become part of our definition of good. Okay, and that makes no sense. It used to be just moral authority was acting on what you knew was right. Not acting on it doesn't count. It's acting on what you know is right. The dojo or the training hall or whatever you want to call it is about the only place left in our society where people are expected to be extraordinary, where they're pushed to be better than average, where they don't get punished when they do well. And that makes it a sacred space. It makes it incredibly important because you may be the only voice in their head when they're being attacked, when they're put down. They're going to have, their mom saying, don't hit, it's not right to hit back. They're going to have all those voices in your head. You may be the only voice in their head saying, you can do this, you have to do this, do this. So.
Yeah, that's critical. The other thing I liked about your permission on that, because I think that part of the permission is really, really powerful. And then the one thing I really liked was towards the end, and probably just because of, me being in the industry and everything. Yeah. I loved how you say, hey, listen, you got permission to be better than me.
Yeah.
You have permission to take what I've given you and excel beyond it. And I hope you do. I mean, my greatest hope is that the next generation goes way beyond what I go, hey, we got it this far for you guys. Good luck. Go with it, man. Make it better. Because I think the whole idea, the other part of permission is permission for you to, have your own way, do your own method, your own, what works for you, because it's an intensely personal thing. Because when you're going to need this information, you want to make sure that you're 100% confident that this is yours, that you're not mimicking something else that you're really not sure about. And I think saying that, hey, it's okay to doubt me. It's okay to, I'm going to present this information. You take what works for you, and go on for it, because I can't make that decision for you. And there's too many people, I think, I don't know if they all willingly do this, but the guru stuff is just a very dangerous thing, I think, especially I don't see a guru being bad in a sports situation. That's fine. I mean, I don't think it'll be as effective, but if you're training somebody to potentially protect themselves in a life or death situation, having them straddled with a guru complex is really dangerous.
Well, bad guys want you submissive. Consciously not gurus want you submissive. So how are they not bad guys? And how is that not conditioning you to be submissive? One of the things I hate, we talk about operant conditioning a lot, stimulus response training. It's the only way I know to get close to reflex speed. But one of the things that happens in martial arts all the time that people don't get is someone tags the instructor or scores on the instructor, and the instructor just makes an example out of them, just brutalizes them. Okay, so if you spent 5 years teaching this person to be good enough to tag you, in that one instance of punishing them for what they trained to do, you've taught their hindbrain that losing is safer than winning. It doesn't matter at that point how many years you've trained them, you just conditioned them into a victim.
Yeah.
And we need to watch for when we're doing this.
Yeah, because there's just too much. I see it oftentimes in some of the combat sports that's trained, and where it's really prevalent, that I see and dangerous in some ways, is when you have an operator, law enforcement, military, and they go in with that type of an approach to something. I remember there was a Marines stopped a car after an IED went off.
Mm-hmm.
They came out and they all drew down. 3 Marines. They drew down on it. 1 Marine went, opened the door. The first 2 guys were compliant in the front seat. The guy in the back wasn't. 3rd Marine goes in, opens the door. The guy comes out right away, and they get into it right away. The after action report was really interesting. But what happens is they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What these other 2 guys don't realize is the guy that seems like he's fighting with the other Marine isn't fighting. He's trying to get to the grenade. And so he has a grenade. The Marine that's engaged with him figures it out, and to his credit, turns him, jumps on it, literally jumps on the grenade, posthumously gets the Silver Star. And they're reading the whole thing. The Marine that sent that to me, the gunnery sergeant sent it to me. He said, he goes, nobody put this into the report. He goes, when we interviewed the other 2 Marines, and we said, why didn't you go engage with him? And they both said the same thing. Well, he was winning. They saw it as a sport event, as a competition, because that's how the Marines were training at the time, in a sporting environment. And they saw a differentiation between the 2. Meaning, now had the guy come out and immediately, engaged a weapon, all 3 would have been on him.
Yeah.
And that to me is the danger when you look at stuff like this. I understand esprit de corps, I understand competition, but you have to also, those Marines were done a disservice, thinking that way. And it was interesting. And I think you do a really, really good job of differentiating between the 2, because oftentimes what people think is you think somehow you're denigrating combat sports or not appreciating it for what it is. And that's not true at all. That is it the right tool for the job?
Well, even knowing it, I would still find myself, even late in my career, I'd hit the ground and I would go into sport judo. I was good at it. I was skilled at it. It felt like the right place. And it sometimes would take someone trying to gouge my eyes to realize, wait, this is not a judo match. I can't afford that mindset. Because I would forget that the one I'm thinking of now, I was in a room with 65 inmates. And there was one other officer, but he was doing other things. And it's like, if any, a tenth of those 65 had decided to come in and put a boot to help this guy out, it would have been over. It would have been absolutely over. But I let myself get into that. And every time I went sport mindset, which again, not denigrate, I did it for a long time and I loved it. I still do love most aspects. I like sparring. I like grappling because they're fun.
Yeah.
But every time I went into that mindset, I extended the time. I didn't try to finish as fast as possible. And the longer it lasts, the more chance there is of you getting hurt. There's no way around that. Time correlates with injuries. The quicker it's over, the safer it is.
The first time I was kind of introduced to that concept was I read an article in the San Diego Reader. I believe it was 1991, 1990. And it was about a cop, a turn of the century cop in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And basically back then the training was the sergeant, they meets the sergeant. He goes, son, do you know good, right from wrong? He goes, yeah. He goes, here's your badge, here's your gun, go do good. And he went out there. And this guy did a lot. I mean, there were a lot of over his career. It was just an amazing interview. But one of the most interesting things was when he started actually going on the street, and they had a lot of riots with the sailors and stuff like that. He said he had to stop boxing. He was a very good boxer, and he had to stop boxing because it threw his timing off in the street. Mm-hmm. And it was there. And I remember thinking about that. And then he talked more about the idea of kind of what you're touching on now. What he was saying was, he says, no, when I can't afford to box, use my boxing methodology in the streets because I'm behind the power curve at that point. And these untrained people who are just violent, it actually hinders me. And that was an eye opener, you know, when I read that. It was the first time I heard somebody, you know, articulate it that way.
It's important. One of the arguments I have a guy I go to brush up on the Philippine stuff. He's excellent, but one of the things we disagree with for self-defense is rhythm. He thinks everything is rhythm.
Yeah.
And I think rhythm is giving someone 3 beats to kill me for me to figure out their timing better. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I think people misunderstand, like, you know, when you just see. I remember the thing that caught me as a kid. There was a guy I knew that was a really great, you know, karate black belt. He was great. He was awesome in the thing. I grew up on Navy bases, and so I'd always, you know, go around. I saw him in school. I saw him in the line, you know, going through the lunch line, and some kid had cut in front of him, and he, you know, he said something, he bowed up on him, and he went to like get in a martial arts stance. The other kid didn't even hesitate, came right up behind, comb grabbed the back of his hair, kicked his feet out from under him, and just started slamming his head on the tray, you know, like on the ledge there, boom,
Yeah.
and just dropped this kid. And it shocked everybody because that wasn't supposed to happen, you know, and this guy had nothing for that. He didn't recognize that, you know, there are some people that just, okay, I see what you're saying. That means you want to fight. And instead of doing a stance, I'm going to go right into it. And it was those reality checks that if you're fortunate enough to see them and learn from them, you realize that, you know, I tell people all the time, they'll say, oh, you know, you're a big guy, you're this, you got, you know, tattoos, all this other, you know, BS, you know, yeah, I do. I have all that. I got the look and the feel. And I tell people all the time, go, if that works on you, you're not the person I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the people I'm talking about, that means nothing to them. As a matter of fact, they'd probably just, you know, I'd be a nice trophy, you know, for somebody like that. And you have to be very realistic about what you're dealing with, you know.
The ones that are most worrisome, it's like I said this once, a guy, I'm not worried about the tattooed up guy, because, you know, real predators try to be invisible. The person who's trying to be invisible, that's the one that scares me. But that said, they don't go, certain levels of bad guys don't go off randomly.
Right.
It's one of those, if someone, either I did something to him in the past that he remembers, I did something to his family and I don't do that, so that's not a thing, or he got paid to. And there's no one, I mean, I don't cheat on drug deals. They're very limited list of things that'll get you on that type of predators list. And they're pretty much predictable. One of the most dangerous human beings I know in terms of just, you know, history of mayhem, I am perfectly safe around because I've never messed with his family and no one's paid him to hurt me. I'm actually safer in his presence because if anything starts to kick off, that's one of the best people you'd have on your side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting part about it too, is the idea that I found situations or places that are kept intact with the threat of violence,
Yes,
basically, are actually really great place. I mean, you understand what to do. People are more polite. You know, people interact better, and you know the rules. You know what you can't do. You know, and it's the places where people get in trouble. Where I see a lot of people that I come in contact with, they are in environments where they can get away with bad behavior, and there's no consequence, and then they take it to the wrong place, and they're not equipped for it. They don't understand what's about to happen.
I should have worn my German Outlaw Biker Motor Club shirt. I had that epiphany. I was invited to the Red Devils end of the riding season party in Kassel, Germany. And so it's like, great, I'm a middle-aged former cop hanging out with a bunch of German motorcycle gangs, and we're going to be a lot of drinking, and this could end badly in so many ways. I can't even do a list. Sure, I'll go. And that was the thing. I realized that I don't normally like hanging around groups.
Right.
But this was, everyone there was a tough guy, and I don't mean that facetiously, but even the smallest person there was willing to hurt you. And so everyone was incredibly polite and happy. and nice. And I realize that the groups I don't like, groups of weak people, are backbiting and gossiping and just being shits to each other all the time because they're weak, so they got to be sneaky. They assume everyone else is weak, so they feel brave enough. And anyway, it solidified in my head that one of the it's gonna sound terrible. One of the reasons I think that we do self-defense training is to make more strong people, because they're just way less annoying than weak people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, the most dangerous people that I know are incredibly calm. You know, just they live life. They're doing it, but they have no hesitation. They know, you know, when the line is crossed, there's no hesitation in what they do. And being in environments like that, I've always found I'm a far more relaxed in those environments than I am, you know, really. I've had the opportunity to go in some, you know, crazy celebrity type stuff and all that. And, it's just such an annoying situation because people get away with such bad behavior and they don't realize, you know, you never know who the hell you're around. I try to tell that all the time. I took my son to CCDC when he was, you know, when he was probably about 14. And my buddies worked there here in Las Vegas. And I just wanted him to see it. You know, and I'll tell you, Rory, you said it 2 times in this interview. It was the first time I experienced what a correction officer does. We went into one of those medium, you know, areas. It was one officer and there were 65 inmates all sitting in, and he's writing them. And at any time it could go in. And the lecture they gave my son going in there, you know, he was kind of doing the high school thing. He had his hands in his pockets, stuff like that. He learned very quickly about presence, how you go in, what eye contact means, all that other stuff. It for those that haven't experienced it, it's unlike anything else. Yeah, I've been in some hardcore military groups, all this other stuff. There's nothing like going into a corrections facility if you've never experienced it. And just I mean, we walked in and it was like just all eyes were on us right away. It was like the record just scratched and boom, and they're immediately assessing you. You know, who are you? Are you a threat? Are you somebody I can, you know, it was amazing just how quickly you sound that. But what was interesting was when I took my son out of there, you know, on there, I asked him, I go, why do you think I took you there? And he said, oh, you know, Dad, so I don't go to prison, you know. I go, no. I said, if you're stupid enough to do something that's going to get you into prison or become a criminal, that's on you. I'm not worried about that. I said, you know, in CCDC, for those that don't, CCDC that doesn't, that for people that don't know, it literally dumps right out into Fremont Street. So when people are getting out, you know, when they're getting discharged, they're right out there in Fremont. And so I said, okay, look out there. And I saw all the people walking along Fremont. And he goes, yeah. I go, where are they? And he goes, what do you mean, Dad? I go, where are they? I go, I saw at least 10 get discharged since you and I have had this talk. He goes, I don't know. I go, exactly. I said, you don't know. Outside of your social circles, when you're there, you're coming out. And so then how are you going to interact with people? You know, and the thing I tell people is like, I learned very quickly because I saw the other side of it, that I treat people for the most part that I don't know like they're 6 seconds away from a shooting spree, and I don't want to be the one that's going to trigger them, you know. And it's a little extreme sometimes, but what it means is it just I take that air, you know, that thing that we're talking about being in an environment where it is backed up by the, you know, the credible threat of violence. I kind of, that's how I operate, because I never know what I'm dealing with, and I don't want to be the one to trigger it unnecessarily, you know. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of what I see, a lot of my clients and people get into, or the reason they come train, is they violated that in some way, shape, or form oftentimes, and they had no idea what the results were going to be. And it was enough to scare the hell out of them, or they actually had an incident happen.
Yeah. Close calls are as scary to some people as the incident.
Yeah.
And with less consequences. Yeah.
Do you
I like your parenting style though.
What's that?
I like your parenting style.
You know, I listen,
I'm not being facetious at all. I like
No,
it.
no, I think that's ridiculous. Scared straight is ridiculous. If a kid's going to be a criminal, he's going to be a criminal. I mean, it's just, these are just, I've seen it all over. I've seen all aspects of that thing. There were those rare individuals where it was something that they got involved in that was rare, but I saw amongst my friends, growing up, there were conscious choices that people made and had nothing really to do with the family background. It was from all over. Some of the kids from bad families turned out to be amazing kids. Other kids from great families, just full cold stone criminals. So, that was the same thing. But I think where most people, I think the most dangerous thing that people have that's out there is this idea of thinking the world needs to be the way they wish it was rather than the way it really is. And I think as self-protection, instructors, self-defense instructors, inculcating that into people that, hey, guess what? It's nice. It would be nice if the world was the way you wanted it to be, but it really isn't. And therefore, you got to think about, I think half the battle is teaching people how to conduct themselves in society to minimize the chance of them unnecessarily bringing it upon themselves. And I think, especially in this day and age of social media and all the other stuff, I think it's never been more, that skill set's never been more needed.
I think things are way less violent than they were like in the 80s or the late 70s.
Yeah.
And I do see people I worry about because they have this idea that that there's physics in the real world and then what you're talking about, the way they think the world should be. I know one person, she drives me nuts, very narcissistic. Mm-hmm. But one of the things in Seattle, the pedestrian always has the right of way. And so she has taken it upon herself to step in front of moving vehicles to teach people the lesson. And it's like, there's right of way, but there's also right of weight. If she does that and someone has bad brakes, she's just dead. And only because she's being self-righteous. And that's the thing that I see. And I don't see a lot of it. One of the things, when I was in Iraq, we were staying at Fob Shield and there were National Guard units that were running through there. So these were mostly like 18 to 22-year-old kids. One of the ones that was there was an MP unit, I think from Oklahoma. And they were 10 times as good kids as I was at that age. I was really impressed with these men and women. And so I have a little bit of the old man these days and, kids these days. And so it's good to have examples like that too, because they aren't all, weak and selfish and entitled.
No.
But there's a shit ton of people that think since no one can punish them when they say shit on the internet, that they should be safe to say that shit any place. And sometimes their choices of places are terrible. Their ability to read a room is almost completely missing. I do worry about that, but I think when I'm objective, it's less of a problem than I think it is. I think
I think anything that does happen because of the 24-hour media now, it's overblown and you think more of it's happening than it is. But I agree. Back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of stuff went. I think of some of the stuff that went down just as a kid that we'd know about, and our parents would still let us be gone all day and all this other. Mm-hmm. It was a different time, that way, and we looked at those things differently. I think now, with the helicopter parenting and everything that's going on, kids grow up with this sense that there's not a lot to worry about. And there's no physical ramifications to bad behavior, and that to me is part of the thing that I'm seeing with society getting more and more crass. And I think one of the things that can solve that is if people traveled more to other parts of the world. Try the pedestrian move in Colombia where you don't have the right of way, and they will literally run you right over, and they will be in the right for doing it. It's just interesting, when you see how other societies interact and how they look at violence and how they interact, you realize, we live in a society we're very, very privileged in how we are able to socially interact with each other without the consequences that other citizens face in other countries.
Yeah. And consequences are how we learn.
Yeah.
And if you don't have any, you aren't going to learn.
No. What would you say, like what, where are you at right now in your, in your training? And you're at a point now, you've already been pretty prolific in sharing information, in getting that out in the training aspect. Has anything changed from when like where you first started, when you first started training, and where you're at now? What motivates you to still get, what still motivates you, and what do you have no interest in anymore?
Um, okay, good question. I have no interest in systems anymore. I went through a kind of a tightening phase when I was working the jails where everything had to be exactly what I trusted. And I wouldn't train with good people, or with good systems, because I didn't want anything that contradicted what I had in my head. The worst thing you can have in your head in a fight is two good options. Okay, you want one. You want a decision stick. You don't want a decision tree. As I'm not in that world anymore, I could play an experiment. Or backing up, it's like at one point, I could do Taekwondo because that does not in any way in my brain go in my fighting box. It's just a super fun game of high speed tag, and I loved it, but it didn't interfere with my fighting at all. Until the instructor tried to teach knife defense, in which case I just had to drop out because that was something that I could actually get killed over. But the systems, realizing how much of any given martial art is basically trappings around a handful of like 2 or 3 or 4 good ideas. I want to learn the good ideas. If there's a body mechanic I haven't seen before, I want to see that. So our training right now, and I'm getting lazy as I get older, and the lockdowns did not help. So what we were doing up until the lockdowns, I had a couple of groups of people that we just get together every month or so and brawl. We called it the violence prone play groups. And we all have stuff that we're working on all the time. So it's like, I'd be thinking, how do I teach break falls fast? And so we go brainstorm it. And then if it was physical, we try it out. So I usually quote Inigo Montoya on this. I'm more pursue than study lately.
Yeah.
So the things that are fascinating me now specifically are, I'm getting a little, I've gotten it down enough that it's starting to get a little stale. Like you said, you aren't enjoying the teaching as much.
Yeah.
I'm not either, because it's no longer this big mystery to me that I want to get right.
Right.
I think I've got it toned down. The other, and this is completely stupid, or will sound stupid, but I'm getting into quirky, weird body mechanics. So one of the things I love, I use everywhere, is the leverage point at the back of the elbow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you get back here, you can control almost anyone, no matter how big they are. You can shut them down, you can move them, you can put them on the ground, you can twist them up. It just has more leverage on the upper body than anything else. So one of the other things, one of my favorite takedowns is to simply, you can usually do it on the chin, but you can do it on the shoulder. If you just roll up and back, it freezes the person's spine and they go down right at their heels. So what I've been playing with is, can I use this point to control this point and do that as a remote control without even getting to their core? And it's like, so that's the kind of stuff I'm playing with now is, how weird can I make my body mechanics and still have them work?
But it's also, I think also too, it's funny. I'm appreciating movement a lot more as I got older. Like I don't think I spent enough time foundationally, really playing with it, cause you just want to get to the next thing real quick. And you want to get to that real, hard strike or whatever you're trying to do. Now I appreciate that a lot more. And what's really funny is I have young kids right now. And the one thing I've done with all of them is I've started them off in gymnastics, and they also do dance, because I've found my best people, if I got a gymnast or a dancer, I can get them up to speed pretty quick. They understand their body movement. They're really good in the mechanics, and, they don't have a lot of the bad habits that, I had as a young kid and stuff. And so to me, I wish that I had been, I had that opportunity when I was a kid. We didn't have that, but movement, I think, is actually really important, because there's just, if you take the time, just like you said, what you notice, you're like, oh shit, I can get a nice result out of this. And so I get that, because now it's a curiosity to you. It's like, oh, what else works? What else can I do? What else can I pass on? And it's not fair for me to say I don't appreciate training still. I do. One of my favorite courses to do still is the basic course, the intro course. I always think it's fascinating to take a group of people from all different backgrounds, and what can you do in 2 days, and what can they walk away? And it's really interesting. But what I do like more is like seeing some of my other instructors and seeing them, take off, and what they do, and they're doing, and they communicate in a way that I had never said it that way. That's beautiful, what they just did. And to me, that's much more rewarding just to hear that, because I already know what I'm going to say. I know how I'm going to approach it. And, if my communication style works, great. But oftentimes my people say it better, they're just they're better than I am at it.
I'm schizophrenic on that, because I've always wanted my students to excel me. I want them to be better than I am. But when I see someone teach something I taught them better than I can teach it, at the same time, it's like, oh, I'm so proud. And it's like, I'm not useful anymore. I'm just going to leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
I can totally relate to that. Listen, I hope you are understanding the intent of this channel. The intent of this channel is to bring in subject matter experts who I respect and who have something to offer that you're probably not hearing in the industry. There's a lot of good people out there, and I'm having fun bringing them to you. Rory is just one of those just gems that you can really extrapolate a lot of good information from. A lot of it's very disappointing. It's not fun, but I think, in this session, talking about the idea of, permission, how people look at things, what we just ended up with on movement patterns and what's important. And we'll close this out. We got one more part to this, and we'll close this out in the next thing. But, please check out, Chiron Training, his website, definitely get Meditations on Violence. All that information will be in the show notes. And for us, for my stuff, please remember surviveviolence.com. Give us your email, get the free masterclass, and make sure that you're on our list so that you get all the first notices on every event that we have coming. Also, it's a good way for you to communicate with us, and you can get, we can get a quick response from my customer service team. And then if you have any specific requests for this channel, that's a great way to get it to us as well. So surviveviolence.com. And of course, please keep pushing the channel, keep sharing this information. Please send videos that you found interesting to people in your circles. Make them aware of this channel because that's really the only way we can grow it. So all the best.